Hello, this is Alexander Horat with the American Press, and right now we're on part two of the interview.
Yeah.
Supposed to be Farrell.
Well, I think we were talking about the Germans rearming right after Versailles, the 1922 Treaty of Rapallo.
Right,
And my point here is again, just look at the map, people, and you'll understand the policies that nations pursue and why they pursue them. And in Germany's case, Hitler's not even there in 1922. He's about a few months away from pulling the Munich beer hall putsch, and he's going to end up in jail for it. The the map will tell you that the idea of disarming Germany when it's surrounded by countries like France, England, the Soviet Union, and Italy, which are all powerful countries,
right.
is national suicide for the Germans. So you know that they're going to try and rearm somehow. And every time this rearmament disarm Germany thing has been tried, it's failed for that very simple reason. And the same thing happened after World War II. The Germans say, oh, yeah, we're not going to develop nuclear weapons. So what do? They farm it out to South Africa. you know?
Right. Yeah,
So,
somebody
so
else do it.
yeah, it's a very old thing. So my point here is this is uh, if you're familiar with the history, what's going on in Israel and Gaza right now seems to me to be fitting the pattern that somebody somewhere wants a big war awful bad. Uh,
Repeat of history, I think, wasn't there, didn't like OPEC shut off all the oil and stuff?
yeah, that was the Yom Kippur War. I remember that.
So that could possibly happen again. You're thinking like maybe do you think the United States is a little less dependent on oil with other countries
Well,
now?
it was less dependent under Trump, but Biden came along and shut all that down.
Right.
Now, this is the other problem the United States has. If with every misadministration you have a complete 180-degree change of foreign policy, how long do you think the United States is going to maintain its alliances? Not
No.
very long.
Yeah.
If foreign governments cannot rely on this country maintaining a consistent posture and policy with its foreign relations, then you can have the biggest military in the world and it's going to avail you nothing. And this is what's so alarming about the energy policy, because our foreign policy is to a certain extent connected to our energy policy. When we were more or less energy self-sufficient under Trump, he was able to move and maneuver on the world stage with much more flexibility than this administration is able to do so. And now all of a sudden, oh, we've discovered that maybe building a border wall may be a good idea. you know
Right. They're
um
supposedly constructing it, but I don't know. That almost seems like phony to me too, though, because
sure.
like they're saying they're doing all this stuff, but they're not really stopping it.
I yes, precisely, I don't trust this government in general as far as I can throw it.
Yeah.
I certainly don't trust the commie-crats, and I have just a few decimal places of mistrust removed from the commie-crats with the Republicans. And that's my nickname for them, folks. Be offended if you will, but I have no use for either of them.
Yeah, they're basically the same political
Yeah, it's the uniparty,
funded by the same people.
funded by the same people doing the same things. So, I'm not I'm just not convinced that this sudden turn or change of policy is really genuine. They could be just saying it and continuing on as before, as you pointed out. So, I do think there's a possibility of a Yom Kippur like um, energy shortage. What bothers me about all of this is, okay, let's suppose OPEC turns off the spigot,
Yeah.
because we were doing just fine with Saudi Arabia under Mr. Trump. Now all of a sudden we've got big problems with Saudi Arabia because of this business in Gaza. So let's suppose they turn off the spigot. Where are we going to get our oil from? Well, we've got two choices. We can either revitalize all of those projects that Mr. Biden Joe, in his shilling for the Communist Party of China, has managed to do. And yes, folks, I just said those words. Or we can buy our oil from the only other energy source that might be inclined to sell to us. And guess who that is?
Venezuela.
Russia.
Oh, well, yeah.
Or Venezuela. Yeah. So, in other words, we would have to go hand in hand, begging to the very people we've been sanctioning off the planet
Okay.
to get our energy. And, that that they would love that in Caracas, and they would love that in Moscow, and they would exact a pretty high price for it.
So what do you think of all this? So like I said, so it seems like they're opening another front between kind of the West and the East in a way. And now we're seeing, the brick nations, they're seeming to get more nations under their belt. Uh,
Yes.
I don't really know. Does that mean much of anything though? Do you think they're really going to get off the dollar and replace it with something else? Is that really?
They um that has been their consistent goal. Um that's really a very, very important question, because in order to get off the dollar, they also have to get the world off of the SWIFT system. Do you know what SWIFT is?
Yeah, the banking system.
Well, SWIFT stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications.
Right.
It is the international financial clearing system. It's based in Brussels, Belgium. Gee, fancy that. But basically, it is under the thumb of this country. Okay. It's like having a massive worldwide credit card clearing operation. That's what it is. It handles all the electronic financial transfers between banks and between countries. So if you go back, Alex, a few years to the first rumblings of sanctions against Russia, um, you'll discover that the Russians, first of all, decided to build out their own internal financial credit clearing system. So they kicked Visa and MasterCard out of Russia. Shut them down, and they introduced their own debit and credit cards in the mirror system. And then something happened that went right off the financial news radar in this country. In fact, it was not reported widely at all, except on my website. And that was that Japan, this Shinzo Abe was prime minister of Japan at that time.
Right, yes.
And he offered to the Russians to allow them access to Japan's credit card clearing operation in the Eastern Pacific Basin. So, in other words, Abe, whether we know it or not, Abe thumbed his nose at this country big time, because he allowed the Russians access to a clearing system that did an end run around the SWIFT system. Since that time, if you look at the BRICS nations, what they have been doing is they have been making bilateral currency swap agreements. So, for example, and I hope people follow me here, because the question you're asking is crucially important. For example, we have agreements between Russia and India so that India can buy oil from Russia and pay for it in rupees, in Indian rupees. Russia can take those rupees in turn and buy things from India. Okay.
Yeah.
So they have all of these bilateral currency swaps. India and Iran concluded a similar agreement. Japan and India concluded an agreement that if either one was attacked, the other nation would lend logistical support to its military.
Hmm.
Yeah. Now, That was I
against
report.
China, against China, most likely.
That's exactly what it is. It's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. And you'll notice not one mention of the USA in that agreement. It's just Japan and India saying, oh, we'll help supply you.
Yeah.
Now, how are they going to arrange the finances for that? How are they going to clear their accounts? Well, there's no mention of dollars in that.
Hmm.
So my suspicion is they're clearing in yen and rupees again. Now, what does all this mean? What I think it means, Alex, is that as a matter of course, as all of these nations in the BRICS bloc are coming and making these bilateral currency trade agreements, what it means is they've created something that a banker would call a unit of account, kind of like the International Monetary Fund's special drawing rights, or SDRs. It's a purely abstract unit of account that is used at a bank to clear a transaction from one currency to another. So it's a completely artificial thing that exists only in the banks subject to that transaction. But it's a mathematical fiction. It's like a currency, only it's not circulating. So if you go all the way back to Venice, to the Republic of Venice, when you had all those bankers on the Rialto, and they're making all of these ledger entries as transactions to clear one account to another, and they're dealing with all of these international currencies, how are they doing this? What makes it smooth? What makes it able to operate? Well, they create a unit of account, and everything on their ledgers is done in that unit of account, not in the actual currency. Follow me?
Yes.
So what that means is the BRICS nations, in my opinion, probably already have a unit of account. And what they're trying to do is create an infrastructure of international financial clearing like SWIFT, which they would need rather than direct bank to bank dealings. But since they are now doing the direct bank to bank dealings, they've got that unit of account already set up.
Yeah.
So the next step is create the infrastructure. So we've got the International Monetary Fund with its special drawing rights, and we've got the SWIFT system. If you look carefully in the news, you'll discover that, go back a few years, you'll discover that China has been pressing constantly to have its renminbi currency admitted as part of the basket of currencies behind the special drawing rights. So in other words, they want power and influence over that unit of account.
Yeah, that's a really big question too, is who's going to be the leading country of the BRICS nations, which, appears that China would be, but, like India doesn't really like China all that much, but I don't know.
Well, I don't think the BRICS nations are, you're right that China is the national economic leader. But in terms of military power, that's still by far and away Russia. India has a large economy. India is also a nuclear power, but again, India, as far as I'm aware, is behind China in terms of the amount of warheads that it is able to dispose. But um, the BRICS nations the BRICS nations are really an alliance, if you want to call it that. I'd call it more of an entente, like the Entente powers before World War One, in that there's no real coalescence of interests. If you look at pre-World War One Europe, there's no real coalescence of interest between Great Britain, France, and Imperial Russia. I mean, if you look at those three countries, their interests are just, they're not even remotely similar, except in one respect. They all agree that there's a big fat problem in the middle of Europe, and that's called Germany.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. They didn't really have,
Yeah, they've got a problem there. So the BRICS alliance to me looks like it's the same thing. If you look at the major nations comprising it, you've got Brazil, Russia, India, China, and if you want to add South Africa to that mix, go ahead and add South Africa. Those nations have no coalescing geopolitical interests that overlap, other than they're sick and tired of being bossed around by this country. That's what really unites them. So whether or not that alliance is able to stick together and hold together long enough to bring all of this about is another story. I tend to think that the real core of the BRICS alliance is Russia, India, and the hidden player, Japan.
Japan, yeah.
Yeah, I think Japan's the hidden partner here, principally because Russia needs Japan as a counterbalance to China. And Japan, if you look back at Shinzo Abe and the kind of diplomacy that he was pursuing, which it does not appear to me like the Japanese have abandoned at all in the governments that have followed Abe's government. If you look at the kind of diplomacy that he was pursuing, it's very, very cunning in the way that he was operating, because it was clear that he was approaching Russia as a counterweight to China, as a country that had the capital that Russia needs to fund what it wants to do in Siberia, which is build out the infrastructure in Siberia.
They've been trying to
And
do that for a while, though.
they've been trying to do that since the czars.
Yeah.
I mean, and they've been trying to do it because why? Well, China has lots of people, and Siberia is just one great big vacuum. you know um Siberia is basically the Trans-Siberian Railroad and all the cities that are along the Trans-Siberian Railroad. Japan has the technology and the high-speed rail technology, besides China, to make all of Russia's high-speed rail hopes and dreams come true. I even blogged about it.
Things.
Oh, it would be huge. It would be huge. I even blogged about a story a few years ago where the Japanese railroad operating company had been invited by Russia to come and run an experimental test run along the Trans-Siberian tracks.
Yeah.
Now, why was Russia and Japan doing that? Well, it's very simple. The Japanese were there to make on-the-spot assessments of what it would take to convert the entire Trans-Siberian Railway into a high-speed rail network. That's what they were there for. And it was very clear that that's what they were there for. So again, Shinzo Abe was playing, I think, a very careful game with Russia, and it's one that is to Japan's benefit, because Japan needs energy. And where is that energy coming from right now? Well, it's coming from the Middle East through routes that are easily interdictable by China.
So you don't think Russia leads China like it used to?
No,
Okay.
no,
So they're
no,
they don't have the whole,
no, no, no. Um, I go further, Alex. I think if you look at the demographics of modern China, um, China is facing a demographic crunch, because and this happens to all nations that follow these crazy abortion policies.
right.
What they end up doing is they end up creating an older population, and the younger population is not of sufficient numbers or training to run the country. Just look at this country. We've got Senator Feinstein, who just recently died. We have Lindsey Graham Cracker. We have Biden Joe, and I spell that Bai, capital DEN, and Joe is spelled DZHAO. In other words, Chinese spelling of Joe. Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got a bunch of old guys and gals running this country. So I go back to the bad old days of the Soviet Union, when you've got a bunch of old men on top of Lenin's tomb, and someone's holding their arm up, and they're waving like this as all the troops come goose stepping by, and the whole system's falling apart.
Right,
Well,
because they haven't they
we're
haven't they
right.
haven't they haven't discovered the secret of immortality yet.
Well,
So
they haven't discovered immortality. They haven't brought in any fresh blood
yeah, that's true.
because they're too busy killing off all the fresh blood. So, this is China's problem. So
Yeah.
they're in a demographic crunch. And if you're watching the internal politics of the Chinese Communist Party carefully, you know that there are some tensions between Xi and some other members in the Politburo. And Xi, by the way, is the young guy. Some of the other people in the Chinese Politburo are very, very old. So you've got those rivalries going. And on top of that, you've got another problem, and that's Taiwan. Why is that a problem?
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, Taiwan, whether you believe it or not, Taiwan and mainland China have maintained their ties all of these years because there are family connections back and forth, number one. And number two, it's not widely known or appreciated in this country, but you can go into mainland China and still find people that like Chiang Kai-shek. It doesn't get much more nationalist Taiwanese than that. So, I think it's inevitable that those two countries are going to grow together at some point. And at that point, when communist China absorbs 25 million Taiwanese, it will be a very different proposition than absorbing Hong Kong.
And how many
Uh,
people lived in Hong Kong?
oh, there were millions. I think the population was probably around 14, maybe 15 million, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it was
It was
pretty highly
huge.
populated. Do you think that changed the whole Chinese thing at
Oh,
all?
absolutely. I remember that Xi's regime came in and literally put the iron boot on Hong Kong with predictable pushback. And
Right.
that's not going to go away. It may appear to go away, but you're dealing with a nation and a culture that has survived warlords and all of this stuff that is, when push comes to shove, is perfectly willing to create conspiracies and secret societies and so on and continue on that way. Um, in other words, what I'm saying is, I think in the long haul, the Communist Party of China's days are numbered, and everybody knows it. Everybody knows it.
It seems like they're really clamping down though, like
Oh,
trying to
absolutely. Yeah,
outdoor prison type thing.
yeah, yeah. What does that tell you?
It tells you that they're scared,
Bingo.
that they want to. But then again, if they're able to really make the infrastructure, it's kind of worrisome that if they'll ever be able to get out of it. Kind of like North Korea, it just seems like
Right.
they built up that whole North Korean lore and everything, and I don't know.
Well, this is part of the problem that the Chinese government has. If you're Chinese, you can see the big empty cities, and you can see the crumbling buildings and the crumbling roads.
Yeah,
And I can tell you, as someone who lives about a mile and a half from a big interchange on the interstate system here, which interchange has up until about 2 years ago been the same interchange as was built in 1965 when this interstate system was put in. So, in other words, the whole interchange is, number one, obsolete, and number two, crumbling.
yeah.
Okay. And everybody's complaining about it locally. So we've got, and again, this is the local chatter. We're sending billions of dollars to the Ukraine into a war that we cannot win, and neither can Zelensky. And we've got our own open border, and our highways and bridges are crumbling. You don't think they're saying the same thing in China?
Yeah, that's all kind of going full circle, kind of
Yep.
like the Roman Empire. They kind of
Yep.
spending all their money on wars and stuff, and yeah, it's true.
Well, and remember what the Roman Empire did under Diocletian? Pay attention, folks,
He
because you
split it in two.
well, he did more than that. He did more than that.
He built the wall, didn't
No,
he?
he ordered that everybody had basically to lock down and stay where they were.
Oh, he did do that.
He that was the beginning of feudalism right there. That was Diocletian. And when he did that, what happened to the Roman economy?
It
It
tanked.
imploded. Well, it imploded in the West. The Eastern Empire just kind of ignored all of that,
Yeah,
and hence survived for another 1,000 years. But yeah, I mean, we're watching the same nutty solutions being proffered by these people over and over again. Um, and the same thing, if you research the German Hansa during the Middle Ages, 12 and 1300s, the Hansa's doing just fine. So when they need to uh, curb the growing prosperity of the population, what do? Well, they have a plague. And what do when they have a plague? They tell everybody, you got to shelter in place. Don't come into contact with people that have the plague.
right.
Sound familiar?
It does sound very familiar.
Well, and what happened to the Hansa's economy as a result?
Imploded.
Yep. So,
It,
these people really need a new playbook.
it's
The one they're using is very old, and it's getting a little bit predictable.
so what do you think? Like, it seems one thing pretty much across the world that they're doing the same as the whole, decreasing population, except for maybe in India. But like, has that been used before?
Oh
Like,
yeah. Do you
other-
know do you know where the whole business of a maximum carrying capacity of the population of the planet comes from? And do you know what it was when it was first proposed?
wasn't it proposed? Well, if you can give me some, tell me.
Well, it's in my books.
It's in your book, yeah.
It's in my books. The first time that you hear a serious proposal of a maximum carrying capacity population wise of the planet is from the most serene republic of Venice.
Oh, yeah,
And it occurs in the late Middle Ages, early Renaissance, and it's all being it's all being drawn up by a bunch of bankers, okay, who are worried about losing power because, oh look, the rest of these apes on this planet are breeding like rabbits. So we're going to propose a maximum carrying population of the planet, and we've got to do something to curb this population growth, and we better do it now, or we're simply going to be overwhelmed. Was 1 billion people.
wow. So it's already quite a bit past that.
It's a little past that by now.
Yeah,
And like all of these Malthusian idiots, there's one thing that these people never talk about, and that's changing technology.
yeah,
There was probably a maximum carrying capacity back then, but no one knew what it was. It was
right.
all guesswork, and it was all based on contemporary science at the time. Well, agricultural productivity since that time has shot up quite a bit. So we don't really know what, this is my point. We don't know what the maximum carrying capacity is, and no one ever does. And every quote unquote scientific argument that they produce is, if you will examine it carefully, I guarantee you the implicit assumption in most of those arguments is that technology is stagnant.
Right. Yeah, it never upgrades, nothing.
Never upgrades, right? It's it's the same argument behind the idea that what our energy system is built on is fossil fuels. And I'm sorry, I'm one of those abiotic oil people. I Number one, I don't think we're dealing with dead dinosaurs here, folks. So anyway, that's another story.
That's definitely another story. Yeah, I think just all this stuff, that's going on, it's just repeat of a lot of history, like you're
Yep.
saying. And I think I don't know, it's too bad that we're repeating all this bad history. I think people would learn a little bit better by now and try to, you
Well,
know,
everybody thinks that their generation is older and wiser, uh, which is usually never the case. But it's particularly true of people in power. I think there's a certain pathology at work, a kind of um, mental disorder at work, that the people seeking power are usually, by and large, suffused with some sort of narcissistic and, to some degree, sociopathic tendency. Otherwise, they wouldn't get to where they are. They're willing to walk over other people to get to positions of power. And once they're in power, all of those character faults then begin to work. And once they begin to work, everything begins to implode. Biden Joe has made an entire career out of little hypocrisies and venal compromises with what is right and what is wrong.
right.
And in my opinion, when you make an entire career out of self rationalization like that over decades, what eventually happens is the mind becomes unhinged. The mind begins to believe its own lies and becomes demented. So, in other words, I'm looking at Biden Joe as a classic spiritual case of what happens to somebody when they have and are willing to abandon their own conscience and make the little rationalizations. Oh, it was just a small lie. It was just a small little hypocrisy. Biden has been doing this his whole life. And here we are.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing what you just said because yeah, it seems like the people running the world are bankers mostly, and they just want to earn
Yeah.
their. It's like they don't care about other people; they only really care about themselves, right?
They are only concerned with their own wealth and their own power and getting it, and once they get it, maintaining it. I mean, for crying out loud, we have this character, Klaus Schwab. My nickname for him is Der Hochklaus von Bloschwab, Freiherr von Bloviation und Bombburst.
Yeah,
Because because he's just a caricature of himself. He's a Hollywood B movie villain. He's like Dr. Evil with his pinky, and he's gonna ransom the world for $1 million. And might want to bump up the price. There's been inflation.
right.
But he's such a caricature of himself. And his father was a Nazi general. I mean, how much more of a caricature could you get than this bloviation on the world stage, and hosting his little conferences with all the wealthy. This ain't gonna play anymore. It's like watching Spectre. you know it's in real life, unfortunately. We're living inside of a James Bond movie, for crying out loud.
Yeah, they do say like these movies are like programming of what they want to make the world look like or
Oh
something.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. I think so.
So have you been writing some new books lately, or any other new?
Well, I just had one come out a couple months ago. There it is. It's called The Demon in the Acre. And the subtitle is Angels, Demons, Plasmas, Patristics, and Pyramids.
That looks like
Uh, it's quite a crackerjacker. It's more of my high octane off the end of the twig speculation. Oh, you go lay down, little dog. My dog is up here. Um, no, you go lay down. Go lay down. Um, I have started researching another book, and I even did a little writing on it a couple days ago. Um, if this one pans out to be something that I can make into a book, which I think it's going to do, um, people will definitely want to read it. I can't even tell what it's about other than in a general way it concerns economics, but other than that I can't say much more about.
and it's probably gonna be out in a few months or so, or how long do you think it'll?
It's going to take me a while because I've been receiving books all week in the mail. I'm sure my mailman is kind of tired of making the trek up to the front porch and plopping down all these packages, but I've had I've had about 1,000 pages plus of reading land on my porch in the last week, so I've got a lot of uh,
Wow.
and I had some books in my library for this already. I've been intending to do at some point a book on this particular topic, and I've got in my other books, I've laid enough of a foundation. It's time to do it, particularly the times being as they are. I think it's time to do this book. I wasn't going to do it for a couple more years, but since the heart attack and everything else, I've thought, well, I better do this. So,
Well, it's good
but
you're feeling better after your heart attack, though. Like you're talking and everything seems good, and like
yeah, I'm doing a lot better. I'm not, as people can tell, I'm not sitting here chugging cigarettes. I chug cigarettes off camera,
yeah.
so I can avoid the lectures. Um, but yeah, I seem to be doing better. The stent that they put in my heart seems to have worked fairly well. I just had my checkup yesterday, as a matter of fact, my 6 months checkup, and I seem to be doing well, although they want me to get blood work done. But anyway, hopefully, cross your fingers.
I do, and I'm sure God's watching out for you, and you're doing better. So that's
Well, I hope so. I if it wasn't for that, I'd probably be 6 feet under by now. So that was I think some divine mercy there as far as that goes. So no, my dog was whining again. Yeah,
yeah.
you be good.
Everybody can visit your site at Giza Death Star still, right? And
Yep,
everybody
yep.
is.
All the books are there on the website. They can order them right off the website, and my blogs continue.
So, is there anything else you'd like to add for this video?
No, I'm that pretty much does it for me. If you're satisfied, I'm satisfied.
Sounds good, Joseph. Well, I think everybody please visit Joseph's site and check out his books and get one. And just like to thank you for being on the show again.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Yep. Bye bye.